Supreme Personality of Godhead. The law and order of the universe is directed by different demigods, and it is here said to emanate from the Lord's arms, the Lord's arms. Mandara Hill is mentioned here because when the ocean was churned by the demons on one side and the demigods on the other, Mandara Hill was taken as the churning rod. The Lord, in his tortoise incarnation, became the point for the churning rod, and thus his ornaments were polished by the turning of Mandara Hill. In other words, the ornaments on the arms of the Lord are as brilliant and lustrous as if they had been polished very recently. The wheel in the yogis, in the hand of the Lord, called the Sudarshan chakra, has 1,000 spokes. The yogi is advised to meditate upon each of the spokes. He should meditate upon each and every one of the component parts of the transcendental form of the Lord. Hare Krishna. Okay. We'll go on to the next one, text 28. The yogi should meditate upon his club, which is named Komodaki and is very dear to him. This club smashes demons who are always inimical soldiers and is smeared with their blood. One should also concentrate on the nice garland on the neck of the Lord, which is always surrounded by bumblebees with their nice buzzing sound. And one should meditate upon the pearl necklace on the Lord's neck, which is considered to represent the pure living entities who are always engaged in his service. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The yogi must contemplate the different parts of the transcendental body of the Lord. Here it is stated that the constitutional position of the living entities should be understood. There are two kinds of living entities mentioned here. One is called the arati. They are They are averse to understanding the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For them, the Lord appears with his hand clutching the terrible mace, which is always smeared with bloodstains from his killing of demons. Demons are also sons of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, all the different species of living entities are sons of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are, however, two classes of living entities who act in two different ways. The Supreme Lord keeps on his neck those living entities who are pure, as one protects the jewel and pearls on the bosom and neck of one's body. Those living entities in pure Krishna consciousness are symbolized by the pearls on his neck. Those who are Krishna conscious are symbolized by the pearls on the neck. Those who are demons and are inimical towards the pastimes in the supreme personality of Godhead are punished by his mace, which is always smeared with the blood of such fallen living entities. The club of the Lord is very dear to him because he uses his instrument to smash the bodies of the demons and mix their blood. As mud is kneaded with water and earth, so the earthly bodies of the enemies of the Lord or the atheists are smashed by the club of the Lord, which becomes muddied with the blood of such demons. Well, pretty gory explanations there. Text 29. Can you make the lights lighter? Ah, that's much better. Haribol. The yogi should then meditate on the lotus-like countenance of the Lord, who presents his different forms in this world out of compassion for the anxious devotees. His nose is prominent, and his crystal clear cheeks are illuminated by the oscillation of his glittering alligator shaped earrings. Report. The Lord descends to the material world out of his deep compassion for his devotees. There are two reasons for the Lord's appearance or incarnation in the material world. Whenever there's a discrepancy in the discharge of religious principles and there is prominence of irreligion, the Lord descends for the protection of the devotees and the destruction of the non-devotees. When he appears, his main purpose is to give solace to his devotees. He does not have to come himself to destroy the demons, for he has many agents, and even the external energy, Maya, has sufficient strength to kill them. But when he comes to show the compassion to his devotees, he kills the non-devotees as a matter of course. The Lord appears in a particular form loved by a particular type of devotee. There are millions of forms of the Lord, but they are one absolute. They are one absolute. As stated in the Brahma Samhita, Advaitam, Achyutamanadhyam, Anantarupam, all the different forms of the Lord are one, but some devotees want to see him in the form of Radha and Krishna, and others prefer him as Sita and Ramachandra. Others would see him as Lakshmi Narayana, and others want to see him as four-handed Narayana, Vasudeva. The Lord has innumerable forms, and he appears in a particular form as preferred by a particular type of devotee. A yogi is advised to meditate upon the forms that are approved by devotees. A yogi cannot imagine a form for meditation. Those so-called yogis who manufacture a circle or target are engaged in nonsense. Actually, a yogi must meditate upon the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that has been experienced by the Lord's pure devotees. Yogi means devotee. Yogis who are not actually pure devotees should follow in the footsteps of devotees. It is especially mentioned here that the yogi should meditate upon the form which is thus approved. He cannot manufacture a form of the Lord. Okay, very cool. Text 30. The yogi then meditates upon the beautiful face of the Lord, which is adorned with curly hair and decorated by lotus-like eyes and dancing eyebrows. A lotus surrounded by swarming bees and a pair of swimming fish would be put to shame by its excellence. I'm sorry, elegance. I'm sorry, by its elegance. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. One important statement here is Yayan Manomayam. Manomayam is not imagination. Impersonalists think that the yogi can imagine any form he likes. But as stated here, the yogi must meditate upon the form of the Lord, which is experienced by devotees. Devotees never imagine a form of the Lord. They are not satisfied by something imaginary. The Lord has different eternal forms. Each devotee likes a particular form and thus engages himself in the forms. Each devotee likes a particular form and thus engages himself in the service of the Lord by worshiping that form. The Lord's form is depicted in different ways according to scriptures. As already discussed, there are 8 kinds of representations of the original form of the Lord. These representations can be produced by the use of clay, stone, wood, paint, sand, etc., depending upon the resources of the devotee. Mano Mayam is a carving of the form of the Lord within the mind. This is included as one of the 8 different carvings of the form of the Lord. It is not imagination. Meditation on the actual form of the Lord may be manifested in different manners, but one should not conclude that one has to imagine a form. There are 2 comparisons in this verse. First, the Lord's face is compared to a lotus, and then his black hair is compared to hummingbees swarming around the lotus, and his 2 eyes are compared to 2 fish swimming about. A lotus flower on the water is very beautiful when surrounded by humming bees and fish. The Lord's face is self-sufficient and complete. His beauty defies the natural beauty of a lotus. Very nice text, number 31. The yogi should contemplate with full devotion the compassionate glances frequently cast by the Lord's eyes, for they soothe the most fearful threefold agonies of his devotees. His glances, accompanied by loving smiles, are full of abundant grace. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. As long as one is in the conditional life, in the material body, it is natural that he will suffer from anxiety and agonies. One cannot avoid the influence of material energy, even when one is on the transcendental plane. Sometimes disturbances come, but the agonies and the anxieties of the devotees are at once disturbances, I'm sorry, at once mitigated when they think of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his beautiful form or the smiling face of the Lord. The Lord bestows innumerable favors upon his devotee, and the greatest manifestation of his grace is his smiling face, which is full of compassion for his pure devotees. And that's a very, let's say, profound statement. Uh, there is no gross type of sex uh, in the uh, spiritual world. But there are what's called uh, uh, full devotion. In other words, the yogis should contemplate with full devotion the compassionate glances frequently cast by the Lord's eyes, where they soothe the most fearful threefold agonies of his devotees. His glances, accompanied by loving smiles, are full of abundant grace. Therefore, the glances of the devotees of Krishna, accompanied by loving smiles, are full of abundant grace. So now, instead of engaging in gross sex life, the ability of, let's say, uh, the ability to contemplate with full devotion the compassionate glances frequently cast by the Lord's eyes, soothe the most fearful threefold agonies of his devotee. His glances, accompanied by loving smiles, are full of abundant grace. This is what satisfies the devotees. They don't have to engage in gross activities. Purport. As long as one is in conditional life in the material body, it is natural that he will suffer from anxieties and agony. One cannot avoid the influence of material energy, even when one is on the transcendental plane. Sometimes disturbances come, but the agonies and anxieties of the devotees are at once mitigated when they think of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his beautiful form or the smiling face of the Lord. The Lord bestows innumerable favors upon his devotees, and the greatest manifestation of his grace is his smiling face, which is full of compassion for his pure devotees. So, this is the way that genuine devotees are, let's say, uh, engaged ecstatically in the service of the Lord. Why? Because uh, they're able to contemplate with full devotion the compassionate glances frequently cast by the Lord's eyes, where they soothe the most fearful threefold agonies of his devotee. His glances, accompanied by loving smiles, are full of abundant grace. So, this is what really satisfies the devotee. He doesn't have to engage in gross activities. These, what you call compassionate glances, frequently cast by the Lord's eyes, will soothe the most fearful threefold agonies of his devotees. His glances, accompanied by loving smiles, are full of abundant grace. Well, you would not think that that's enough to satisfy a devotee, but it is. Devotees do not have to engage in gross activities of sex and things like that. They're completely satisfied by the glances of the Lord, uh, who has the loving smiles, and they are full of abundant grace. So then that purport says, as long as one is in conditional life in the material body, it is natural that he will suffer from anxieties and agony. One cannot avoid the influences of material energy, even when one is on the transcendental plane. Sometimes disturbances come, but the agonies and anxieties of the devotee are at once mitigated when they think of the Supreme Personality Godhead in his beautiful form or the smiling face of the Lord. The Lord bestows innumerable favors upon his devotee, and the greatest manifestation of his grace is his smiling face, which is full of compassion for his pure devotees. So all the, let's say, uh, difficulties of life, and you say fear, and and uh, and let's say abject feelings go away when you see the smiling face of the Lord, and his glances. They soothe the most fearful threefold agonies of his devotees. His glances, accompanied by loving smiles, are full of abundant grace. That is, see, most people, they think that sex is the highest state of happiness. But for a devotee, the glances of the Lord and his grace uh, is the highest form of happiness. So the Lord bestows innumerable favors upon his devotees, and the greatest manifestation of his grace is his smiling face, which is full of compassion for his pure devotees. Okay, a yogi, next verse 20, 30, 30, 32. A yogi should similarly meditate on the most benevolent smile of Lord Sri Hari, a smile which, for all those who bow to him, dries away the ocean of tears caused by intense grief. The yogi should also meditate on the Lord's arched eyebrows, which are manifested by his internal potency, in order to charm the sex god for the good of the sages. So you see, uh, spiritual, let's call it spiritual sex, is not uh, something that is achieved by the gross form of sex. Spiritual sex is achieved by these glances of the Lord and the arching of his eyebrows, which are manifested by his internal potency in order to charm the sex god for the good of the sages. This is incomprehensible for gross people. But when one becomes purified, there is sex, there is spiritual sex, but it's different than the gross form of sex. Uh, so that's why it says uh, a yogi should similarly meditate on the most benevolent smile of Lord Sri Hari, a smile which, for all those who bow to him, dries away the ocean of tears caused by intense grief. The yogi also med- the yogis no, the yogi should also meditate on the Lord's arched eyebrows, which are manifested by his internal potency, in order to charm the sex god for the good of the sages. Now, these are very profound statements. It overrides any even uh, let's say uh, any overrides the gross, let's say, understanding of what sex is. There is spiritual sex, but it is not what people think uh, in the material world. It is something that is transcendental, and it is, let's say, uh, meditating on the most benevolent smile of Lord Sri Hari, a smile which, for all those who bow to him, dries away the ocean of tears caused by intense grief. The yogi should also meditate on the Lord's arched eyebrows, which are manifested by his internal potency, in order to charm the sex god for the good of the sages. So uh, before the uh, in before the advent of movies with sound, uh, the actors would accomplish uh, uh, their acting by arching their eyes and different uh, uh, glances. I don't know if you've seen these older movies where there was no sound. It was just different arching of the eyebrows and different forms of bodily, let's say, yeah, bodily expressions uh, to express, the happiness or the suffering of a devotee, of the actor. So that's the way uh, that's it's something like what is being described here. Uh, a yogi should similarly meditate on the most benevolent smile of Lord Srihari, a smile which, for all those who bow to him, dries away the ocean of tears caused by intense grief. The yogi should also meditate on the Lord's arched eyebrows, which are manifested by his internal potency, in order to charm the sex god for the good of the sages. So the different emotions when there was not when there were movies without sound were expressed by the arching of the eyes and eyebrows and by different like kinds of uh, physical, let's say, movements of the body, and especially the uh, 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 facial movements to express, uh, a love or grief or surprise, etc. So this compensated for sound. They didn't have sound, but they spoke through their bodily, let's say, forms or bodily positions, and here it says that uh, the entire universe is full of miseries, and therefore the inhabitants of this material universe are always shedding tears out of intense grief. There is a great ocean of water made from such tears. But for one who surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ocean of tears is at once dried up. One need not see the charming smile. One need only see the charming smile of the Supreme Lord. In other words, the bereavement of material existence immediately subsides when one sees the charming smile of the Lord. Well, that spiritual sex is not something that's gross. It's achieved by the smiles of the Lord, and it's charming and it's overwhelmingly beautiful. So uh, it is stated in this verse that the charming eyebrows of the Lord are so fascinating that they cause one to forget the charms of sense attraction. That is the real statement that one can understand. If you want to understand what spiritual sex is, it's this statement. The charming eyebrows of the Lord are so fascinating that they cause one to forget the charms of sense attraction. The conditioned souls are shackled to material existence because they are captivated by the charms of sense gratification, especially sex life. The sex god is called Makara Dvaja. The charming brows of the Supreme Personality of God. Brows is referring to his eyebrows and the movements of his eyes and so forth. The charming, so let's hear. The charming brows of the Supreme Personality of Godhead protect the sages and devotees from being charmed by material lust and sex attraction. Yamunacharya, a great acharya, said that ever since he had seen the charming pastimes of the Lord, the charms of sex life had become abominable for him, and the mere thought of sex enjoyment would cause him to spit and turn his face. Thus, if anyone wants to be aloof from sex attraction, he must see the smart, charming smile and fascinating eyebrows of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is it. This is the explanation of what spiritual sex is. It is not this gross thing that people engage in with their, miserable bodies. It is the sex enjoyment of a pure devotee is attained by the charms. In other words, uh, by the loving uh, facial expressions of the Lord. This is something that's impossible for gross people to understand. But when one becomes a genuine devotee of the Lord, and he or she begins to understand the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, it's based on these loving expressions or loving, let's say, facial and bodily uh, movements of the Lord that completely put one in ecstasy. That's why it says here, it is stated in this verse that the charming eyebrows of the Lord are so fascinating that they could cause one to forget the charms of sense attraction. The conditioned souls are shackled to material existence because they are captivated by the charms of sense gratification, especially sex life. The sex god is called Makara Dvaja. The charming brows, meaning the movements of the eyes of the Supreme Personality, eyes and the eyebrows. But that's what it says. Uh, the um, charming brows of the Supreme Personality of Godhead protect the sages and devotees from being charmed by material lust and sex attraction. That's the main statement. There's something much better than gross sex. What is it? Uh, the it says here the sex god is called Makaradwaja. The charming brows, so that means the movement of the eyes and the eyebrows of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, protect the sages and devotees from being charmed by material lust and sex attraction. Yamunacharya, a great acharya, said that ever since he had seen the charming pastimes of the Lord, the charms of sex life had become abominable for him. And the mere thought of sex enjoyment would cause him to spit and turn his face. Thus, if anyone wants to be aloof from sex attraction, he must see the charming smile and fascinating eyebrows of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, before the advent of sound in movies. The expressions of the face of the actors and their bodily movements, but mainly the facial expressions, uh, took the place of talking, and they could uh, show people by their facial charms or their facial movements or the movements of their eyes and so forth, what they were thinking. They could show love, they could show fear, etc., by the movement of their eyes and the uh, movement of or the way they uh, express the different emotions through their eyes and eyebrows. So if you watch these silent movies, you can't hear anything, but you see what they're thinking and saying by the movement of their eyebrows and the eyes and physical, let's say, aspects of their communication. You can communicate with your eyes. People can understand your state of consciousness by the movement of the eyes and the eyebrows and so forth. So here it says, it is stated in this verse that the charming eyebrows of the Lord are so uh, fascinating that they cause one to forget the charms of sense attraction. The conditioned souls are, see now, if you look at these old movies before there was sound, uh, like Charlie Chaplin movies, for example, not only him, but there are other actors also. They expressed their different emotions by the movements of their eyes and eyebrows and physical, movements of the body, but it's mainly the eyes and the eyebrows. And it, so they were made able to communicate like that. They didn't have to, there was no sound. The the early time of movies, there was no sound. It was just the acting of the actors, mainly through their eyes and eyebrows and physical, uh, body movements. And they could express love, they could express fear, they could express different types of communicate with different movements of their eyebrows and their physical, movements of the body, but it's mainly the eyebrows and the eyes, and that's what it says here, and also the smile. So one need only see the charming smile of the Supreme Lord. In other words, the bereavement of material existence immediately subsides when one sees the charming smile of the Lord. And you also forget gross sex desire by seeing this charming smile of the Supreme Lord. In other words, the bereavement of material existence immediately subsides when one sees the charming smile of the Lord. It is stated in this verse that the charming eyebrows of the Lord are so fascinating that they cause one to forget the charms of sense attraction. See, that's the main statement right there. The conditioned souls are shackled to material existence because they are captivated by the charms of sense gratification, especially sex life. The sex god called Makara Dwaja. The sex god is called Makara Dwaja. The charming brows, okay, this is referring to their eyebrows and the movements of their eyes and the eyebrows. Uh, so people have eyebrows. That's the hair above the eye. And the movement of the eyebrows and the eyes is what expresses love or fear or hate, etc. So the charming brows of the Supreme Personality of Godhead protect the sages and devotees from being charmed by material lust and sex attraction. It doesn't say by gross sex, people are charmed. That it doesn't say that by gross sex people are uh, engaged in ecstatic feelings. No, it is the charming brows of the Supreme Personality of Godhead protect the sages and devotees from being charmed by material lust and sense attraction. So, charming brows, that means the movement of the eyes and the eyebrows and facial expressions. The charming brows of the Supreme Personality of Godhead protect the sages and devotees from being charmed by material lust and sense attraction. Yamunacharya, a great acharya, said that ever since he had seen the charming pastimes of the Lord, the charms of sex life had become abominable for him, and the mere thought of sex enjoyment would cause him to spit and turn his face. Thus, if anyone wants to be aloof from sex attraction, he must see the charming smile and fascinating eyebrows of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's a very profound statement. And one example of that is when there were silent movies. So how could they make up for the fact that people couldn't hear what they were saying or doing? Well, it was by the movements of their eyebrows, and that's the way they would make the expression of love, or fear, or sex desire, etc. So if you see these movies before they were sound, they express the different emotions through their eyes and their uh, facial expressions. That's and that's what's being said here. It says, it is stated in this verse that the charming eyebrows of the Lord are so fascinating that they cause one to forget the charms of sense attraction. The conditioned souls are shackled to material existence because they are captivated by the charms of sense gratification, especially sex life. The sex god is called Makara Dwaja. The charming brows of the Supreme Personality of Godhead protect the sages and devotees by being charmed by material lust and sex attraction. Yamunacharya, a great acharya, said that ever since he had seen the charming pastimes of the Lord, the charms of sex life had become abominable for him, and the mere thought of sex enjoyment would cause him to spit and turn his face. Thus, if anyone wants to be aloof from sex attraction, he must see the charming smile and fascinating eyebrows of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's an amazing statement by Srila Prabhupada. And it's a fact. Uh, it's also a fact that a mundane woman who, let's say, puts on lipstick and eyebrows, all those things, it can virtually control a man by her charming face and charming brows, uh, by the way she she looks at a man with her, facial expressions that can charm a man and more or less control his mind and senses by the look of a woman. And that's why it says here that, but on the other hand, Yamunacharya, great Acharya, said that ever since he had seen the charming pastime of the Lord, the charms of sex life had become abominable for him, and the mere thought of sex enjoyment would cause him to spit and turn his face. Thus, if one wants to be aloof from sex attraction, he must see the charming smile and fascinating eyebrows of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Haribol. Okay. Are there any questions? Yeah. So if you see a silent movie, well, how do the actors uh, compensate for the fact that there's no sound? It's by uh, the movements of their eyebrows and eyes and different bodily uh, positions that they have, but it's mainly based on their eyes and eyebrows. Right? Yes.
So I have a question not on this topic. It's so Garuda and Shishnag or Adishesh or both, are they both vehicles of the Lord? Or like Garuda is only one and Shishnag is like a bed?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Say it again.
Adishesh and Garuda, right? So are are they both vehicles of the Lord or mounts of the Lord?
Well, Garuda uh, is the bird vehicle of the Lord.
What is Shish? Adishesh? Is he a vehicle of the Lord too?
I'm not sure what Adishesh is. What is
Shish,
it? What?
Shishnag?
Serpent bed.
What?
The serpent bed. The serpent.
Oh, the serpent.
Lord Narayana.
Uh-huh. So then ask your question again.
Are they both vehicles of the Lord? Because all the other
Oh, they're
demigods,
both vehicles of the Lord.
yeah, all the demigods only have one mount. So the Lord has two mounts on.
Well, the Adishesh is the Lord is reclining on the Adishesh, or yeah, there's another name for them. Uh,
Shishnag.
anyway, yeah. So, what is your question again?
Are they both vehicles of the? Because why does the demigods, all the demigods like Ganesha, Durga, Indra, why do they all have one vehicle only? Well, Indra has two, I think.
They all have different vehicles, right? Let's see.
But they all have only one, and the Lord has two. Or should I think of the Lord as one and he has a bed? And my other question is, so there is a history about uh the mother of the snakes and the mother of the birds. They got into fight. So and Sheshnag or Adishish and um Garuda both serve the Lord. Do they get in conflict sometimes? Abhishek and Krishna. No, Adishish and Garuda, because there there's like history that like
Yeah, Vinata.
mm, and all that happened, and so then like snakes, and the Garuda was always mad at the snakes, and Adishish was one of those snakes, right? So is Garuda and Adishish get into conflicts?
1 second, I'm looking something up. 6. Okay, so it says here on the Canto 3, chapter 26, verse number 34. The activities and characteristics of the ethereal element can be observed as accommodation for the room for the external and internal existences of all living entities, namely the field of activities of the vital air, the senses, and the mind. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The mind, the senses, and the vital force, or living entity, have forms, although they are not visible to the naked eye. Form rests in subtle existence in the sky, and internally it is perceived as the veins within the body and the circulation of the vital air. Externally, there are invisible forms of sense objects. The production of the invisible sense objects is the external activity of the ethereal element, and the circulation of vital air and blood is its internal activity. That subtle forms exist in the ether has been proven by modern science by transmission of television, by which forms or photographs of one place are transmitted to another place by the action of the ethereal element. That is very nicely explained here. This verse is the potential basis of great scientific research work, for it explains how subtle forms are generated from the ethereal element, what their characteristics and actions are, and how the tangible element, namely air, fire, water, and earth, are manifested from the subtle form. Mental activities or psychological actions of thinking, feeling, and willing are also activities on a platform of ethereal existence. The statement in Bhagavad Gita that the mental situation at the time of death is the basis of the next birth is also corroborated in this verse. Existence transforms into tangible form as soon as there is an opportunity due to contamination or development of the gross elements from subtle form. So that verse is Canto 3, chapter 26, text 34. The activities and characteristics of the ethereal element can be observed as accommodation for the room for the external and internal existences of all living entities, namely the field of activities of the vital air, the senses, and the mind. So it says here the mind, the senses, and the vital force or living entity have forms, although they are not visible to the naked eye. Form rests in subtle existence in the sky, and internally it is perceived as the veins within the body and the circulation of the vital air. Externally, there are invisible forms of sense objects. The production of the invisible sense objects is the external activity of the ethereal element, and the circulation of vital air and blood is the internal activity. The subtle forms exist in the ether has been proven by modern science by transmission of television. Anyway, this is it's the big science of the subtle forms generated from the ethereal element. What their characteristics and actions are, and how the tangible elements, namely air, fire, water, and earth, are manifested from the subtle form. Mental activities or psychological actions, thinking, feeling, and willing, are also activities on the platform of ethereal existence. Statement in Bhagavad Gita that the mental situation at the time of death is the basis of the next birth is also corroborated in this verse. Mental existence transforms into tangible form as soon as there is an opportunity due to the contamination or development of the gross elements from subtle form. Okay, so we have different thoughts. Those are subtle forms. Uh, and then due to contamination or development of the gross elements from subtle form. So mental existence transforms into tangible form as soon as there is an opportunity due to contamination or development of the gross elements from subtle form. So the mental existence. So when a person has fear, then what happens? Mental existence transforms into tangible form as soon as there is an opportunity due to the contamination or development of the gross elements from subtle forms. Yeah, so you can express state of the mind by or the subtle forms by the movements of the eyebrows and the bodily movements. Therefore, the mental existence, what you're thinking, feeling, or willing in your mind, can transform into tangible form, something that you can actually see, right? As soon as there is an opportunity due to contamination or development of the gross elements from subtle form. So the gross elements are your eyes and your eyebrows, right? Facial, forms that can express your happiness, your misery, your love, your hate, and so forth. So therefore, the mental existence transforms into tangible form as soon as there is an opportunity due to contamination or development of the gross elements from subtle form. Okay, so that is major statements here. And that I'm reading from Canto 3, Chapter 26. Canto 3, Chapter 26, verse number 34. In the same way, it says that subtle forms exist in the ether has been proven by modern science by transmission of television, by which forms or photographs of one place are transmitted to another place by the action of the ethereal elements. That is very nicely explained here. This verse is the potential basis of great scientific research work, for it explains how subtle forms are generated from the ethereal element, what their characteristics and actions are, and how tangible elements, namely air, fire, water, and earth, are manifested from the subtle form. Mental activities or psychological actions of thinking, feeling, and willing are also activities on the platform of ethereal existence. Ethereal means non, it's not gross activity, but it's subtle activity. Okay. The statement in Bhagavad Gita that the mental situation at the time of death is the basis of the next birth is also corroborated in this verse. Mental existence transforms into tangible form as soon as there is an opportunity due to or development of the gross elements. So, so in the first there is thinking, feeling, and willing. So let's say a man sees a beautiful woman. Well, he thinks, he feels, and then he wills that he must have a relationship with that woman. So there's a subtle, let's say, forms, and then there's the gross form. So subtly, he's contemplating the bodily movements of a pretty woman. And then eventually he becomes determined that he has to have some relationship with that woman and eventually engage in uh, copulation or sex with her. So those are, everything begins from the subtle state and then goes to the gross state. But it's illusory because that beautiful woman, after, you know, 30, 40 years, is not so beautiful anymore. And then the whole false attraction to the bodily forms through the movements of our eyebrows and so forth, it all goes away. And now you have an old woman, and that original attraction is lost. So uh, there's this example given. I can't find it right now, but I'll look for it. There's a man that falls in love with a woman, and she's very beautiful, and he wants to have sex with her. So she says, "No, not now." She says, "Come back in a week." So he says, "Wait a minute, I don't want to wait for 1 week." She said, "Okay, then I'm not going to have any interest in you." I said, "Okay, okay, I'll wait for a week." So during that week, she throws up, she passes stool and urine, and she keeps it all in a, uh, let's say, a bucket. And because of extreme throwing up and vomiting and everything, uh, after 1 week, all of the vomit and blood and saliva, she keeps it in a bucket. And because of extreme, let's say, throwing up and things like that, and passing stool, uh, she looks different now than she did when he first saw her. But after a week, he comes back and she started covering her face. And then when he wants to see her face, it doesn't look the same because she's she's been throwing up and passing stool and urine for a whole week, and she looks different than when he saw her 7 days before that. And he says, "Well, what happened to you? Where's your beauty?" And she says, "Look in that bucket, you'll see my beauty." So, uh, beauty of a woman or a man is only skin deep, and it depends on the blood and the stool and the urine of a person. So, uh, this whole thing of I love you, you are beautiful, but that beauty is only skin deep. It's only like, when you say skin, how thick is the skin? It's not even an inch. It's less than an inch, right? So, like for example, if there is a beautiful woman and you put her on a operating table, and then you take your scalpel, knife, very sharp knife, and you start near the throat and go down to the belly button, and then you open up, the two sides of the cut. What do you see? Well, at a certain point, the charm of the beauty of the external body is lost. And now you only see blood, urine, stool, etc. So this so-called beauty is only skin deep. The real person is the organs, the blood, the stool, the urine, etc. So this beauty is a very ephemeral thing. And so does it sound like it's gross? Yeah, it is gross. Uh, so rather than see the gross body of someone, one should see the mental state of the person. So if their mental state is Krishna consciousness, they're beautiful. That's a beautiful person. But the physical state of the person is illusory because it keeps changing and eventually gets old and decrepit. So that's not the way to see the person. The way to see the person is by how they talk, what their desires are, and what their, let's say, conceptualization of the world is, right? So when you have a pure devotee is very beautiful, even if he has physical uh, uh, deformations. He's beautiful because he's speaking, uh, wonderful things about Krishna. So the deformation of the body is not a criteria to understand a person. It's the way they speak, the way they act in Krishna consciousness will determine if they're a devotee. And if they're a devotee, the bodily condition of the person is not that important. What's important is how they're speaking and how they're acting. Okay. There's this joke. There's one time with two monkeys met each other, man, a female and a male. And the male donkey was looking in the face of the female donkey, not donkey, but monkey. And the male donkey is looking at the face of the female monkey, and he said, "No one is as beautiful as you are." Yeah, that's the communication of donkeys. They only look. I mean, monkeys. They only look at each other's face, and they think, "Oh, this monkey is very beautiful." You know. Okay, of course, the Srila Prabhupada ki
Yeah.
jai. Yeah, these are amazing statements. So let's see, we are on Canto 3, Chapter 26, text number 34. Is that right?
No.
What?
Today it's 3:28:32.
Okay, that's why I asked the question. 3:28:32. Yeah. 3. 28:32, right? Yeah, but I was looking at the 326. Um, anyway, yeah, it's just 326. It says, when egoism in ignorance is agitated by the sex energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the subtle element sound is manifested, and from sound comes the ethereal sky and the sense of hearing. And in the purport, it says, it appears from this verse that all the objects of sense gratification are the products of egoism and ignorance. It is understood from this verse that by agitation of the element of egoism and ignorance, the first thing produced was sound, which is the subtle form of ether. It is stated also in the Vedanta Sutra that sound is the origin of all objects of material possession, and that by sound one can also dissolve this material existence. Anavrita Sabda means liberation by sound. The entire material manifestation began from sound, and sound can also end material entanglement. If it has a particular potency, the particular sound capable of doing this is the transcendental vibration. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Our entanglement material affairs are begun from material sound. Now we must purify that sound by spiritual understanding. There is sound in the spiritual world also. If we approach that sound, then our spiritual life begins, and the other requirements for spiritual advancement can be supplied. We have to understand very clearly that sound is the beginning of the creation of all material objects for our sense gratification. Similarly, if sound is purified, our spiritual necessities also are produced from sound. Well, it says in the Bible, in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word became, I looked this up. In the beginning there was, look this up in the Bible. In the beginning there was the Word. Can you see that? Yeah. So everything's coming from sound. In the beginning, there was the Word, and
Yes,
the
Maharaj.
Word was.
The word was with God, and the word was God. Oh, the word was God. Is a verse from Bible, John 1:1. The term word is translated from the Greek word logos, which means the expression of a thought. Jesus is referred to as word or logos of God because he embodied God's message to humanity.
See that word logos?
Yeah.
It's a Greek word. It's very profound. It's the Word of God. So it's subtle and also gross, both. So when it says in the beginning there was the Word, well, that means that everything is coming from the sound vibration of the Lord. And in our, let's say, translated into Krishna consciousness, that the original sound vibration for the Mayavadis is Om.
Yeah.
And for devotees, it's the Hare Krishna mantra, which encompasses the Om also. So it's not that it's different than Om. It encompasses Om. So when you chant Hare Krishna, you're also saying Om. But everything begins from that sound vibration.
Maharaj,
It says the entire material manifestation began from sound, and sound can also end material entanglement if it has a particular potency. The particular sound capable of doing this is the transcendental vibration. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Our entanglement in material affairs has begun from material sound. Now we must purify that sound in spiritual understanding. There is sound in the spiritual world also. If we approach that sound, then our spiritual life begins, and the other requirements for spiritual advancement can be supplied. We have to understand very clearly that sound is the beginning of the creation of all material objects for our sense gratification. Similarly, if sound is purified, our spiritual necessities also are produced from sound. So that statement in the Bible, in the beginning, there was the word, right?
Yeah.
Means that everything begins from the sound vibration of the Lord, or the Om, or the word Om, which is sound vibration. But then there's Om Tat Sat, right? There's the sound vibration of Om, and I don't know what Tat means. I have to look it up. Om Tat Sat. And Sat is the truth, it's the reality. But it begins from Om. Why don't you look up Om Tat Sat?
Yes.
Prabhupada's purports is just amazing. If you don't hear Prabhupada's purports, your life is a failure. So much profound, so many profound statements in what Prabhupada's writing. It's very difficult for a materialistic person to understand these things. Even as devotees, we're just, shocked every day by the profound statements of Prabhupada. Om Tat Sat. What does it say?
Tat means that, and the Sat means truth. So it's a threefold description of the supreme absolute truth, or Brahman, the absolute. It represents the unmanifest and absolute reality and is used in yoga and meditation.
That's not exactly what it is. So what does it mean? Om Tat Sat. Om is basically Krishna, sound vibration of the Lord.
Yes, ma'am.
And Om Tat, I'm not sure what Tat means, and Sat is the truth. Didn't have this. Okay, well, we'll go over this tomorrow. But Om Tat Sat. Okay. All right, we'll stop right there and pick it up again tomorrow. Right. Seven. This is 789. There it is. Okay, in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17, text number 23. Om Tat Sad, iti nirdeso brahmanas tri vidasmita. From the beginning of creation, the three words Om Tat Sat were used to indicate the supreme absolute truth. These three symbolic representations were used by Brahmanas while chanting the hymns of the Vedas and during sacrifices for the satisfaction of the Supreme. Purport. It has been explained that penance, sacrifice, charity, and foods are divided into three categories: the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. But whether first class, second class, or third class, they are all conditioned, contaminated by the material modes of nature. When they are aimed at the Supreme, Om Tat Sat, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Eternal, they become means for spiritual elevation. In the spiritual injunctions, such an objective is indicated. These three words, Om Tat Sat, particularly indicate wait a minute. These three words, Om Tat Sat, particularly indicate the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Vedic hymns, the word Om is always found. One who acts without following the regulations of the scriptures will not attain the absolute truth. He will get some temporary result, but not the ultimate end. The conclusion is that performance of charity, sacrifice, and penance must be done in the mode of goodness. Performed in a mode of passion or ignorance, they are certainly inferior in quality. The three words Om Tat Sat are uttered in conjunction with the holy name of the Supreme Lord, that is Om Tat Vishnu. Whenever a Vedic hymn or holy name of the Supreme Lord is uttered, Om is added. This is the indication of Vedic literature. These three words are taken from Vedic hymns. Om iti etad brahmano netistam nama, Rig Veda, indicates the first goal. Then Tattvam Asi, Chandogya Upanishad 6.8, indicates the second goal. And Sad Eva Somya, Chandogya Upanishad 6.2.1, indicates the third goal. Combined, they become Om Tat Sat. Formally, when Brahma, the first created living entity, performed sacrifices, he indicated these three words, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the same principle has always been followed by cyclic succession. So this hymn has great significance. Bhagavad Gita recommends, therefore, that any work done should be done for Om Tat Sat, or for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When one performs penance, charity, and sacrifice with these three words, he is acting in Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is a scientific execution of transcendental activities which enables one to return home back to Godhead. There is no loss of energy in acting in such a transcendental way. So this verse is chapter 17, verse number 23. From the beginning of creation, the three words Om Tat Sat were used to indicate the supreme absolute truth. These three symbolic representations were used by Brahmanas while chanting the hymns of the Vedas and during sacrifices for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. Okay, so that's why in the Bible it says, in the beginning there was the Word. And what was that word? It was Om, or Om Tat Sat. So everything begins from the sound vibration of the Lord. Okay, we'll think more about this tomorrow. Talk about this a little bit more tomorrow. Hare Krishna.
Great.
Thank you very much. Both glories to Srila Prabhupada and to
Yeah.
I'm gonna meditate on this today. That's why the heart